All right, everyone, welcome to the show. I'm here with Matt Engel, the CEO of Paradromics, which is a brain-computer interface company. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Let's start big picture. Explain to our audience what exactly Paradromics does in the most basic terms, if you can, and what are some of the most interesting opportunities you're seeing in neurotech right now?
Okay, so Paradromics is a brain-computer interface, and what that means is it's a device that can move information from the brain to a computer and vice versa. And so what's interesting about that is, in some sense, everything that we do, everything that we experience is data in some way. Like our senses come to us from our eyes and our ears. They're conveying data to the brain about the world around us. Touch is data. Even everything we do, in some sense, like the movement of our muscles, it originates from control signals from the brain. Thought is data. And if a brain-computer interface can take data and move it between brains and a computer, then that means that we can bring to bear computer technology for a lot of things in our lives. And really where that's interesting is that brain conditions are some of the hardest conditions to cure or treat. When someone loses visual input to their brain when they become blind, we can't build you a new eye. We're really far from that. If someone gets ALS and they lose the ability to control their muscles, we're really far from being able to send signals from their muscles from their brain back to their muscles and allow them to control their body again. These cures are things that we're working on. They're generational science projects. But in the meantime, if we think about it from a data perspective, we say, well, actually, if someone becomes paralyzed, they still have signals in their brain that would have been telling their body what to do. What if we put a brain implant in their brain and we listen to what their brain's trying to do and we let a robotic arm complete the action? Or what if we let them control a computer or speak again through a brain-computer interface? What if we take information from a camera and send it directly to the brain using brain-computer interface? It allows us to reframe some of these conditions that have been with us since the dawn of humanity in a way that we can actually use our technology to treat it.
Really groundbreaking work, clearly, that you all are working on as a team. I understand that Paradromics recently implanted its first brain interface. You've recently implanted its first brain interface.
Yeah.
How is that patient doing post-surgery? How did all of that go?
So the patient is recovering successfully. And I think what's exciting about this is that the patient that agreed to be a participant in this trial, it was purely altruistic on their part. So this was a person who was undergoing a surgery for epilepsy, and they were going to have a piece of their brain removed. And in that specific situation, the hospital can make the determination that we can actually come in with a device that's not FDA approved yet and make recordings in that area of brain that's about to be removed for science and for validating a technology platform. And they allowed this to take place, and the patient volunteered to be part of it. And that was really them, giving to the scientific community and helping people with paralysis who are looking forward to this device in their clinical trial. And so what we were really happy about is we have done a ton of characterization of this device in sheep. We've looked at things like how much data can it record from the brain, how long does it last. In both cases, our device is, in all respects, a world-class brain-computer interface. We're recording the highest data rates ever achieved from a BCI, and the longevity of the recordings over multiple years shows that the signal is going to be stable for a long time. And so we've been reporting this, but it's always been in sheep. And so there's always been a little bit of but will it work in humans? Like, how about the human surgery? And so then to be able to come into the operating room and insert the device in a person in a short amount of time, make recordings, and then take it out. And from the time that we went to put the device in to the time that we physically took the device out, it was about 10 minutes. So it actually takes longer to insert a deep brain stimulator that someone with Parkinson's disease or essential tremor would receive routinely in a hospital as part of a neurosurgical procedure. So we showed that the device inserted and turned on and worked in humans the way we thought it would, and we showed that the surgery time to do that was very short relative to other surgical procedures that are considered safe. And so for us, that made us think, wow, we're now ready to take this device into a clinical trial later this year.
Okay, to that end, I did want to ask you, how does the pathway look for clinical trials to get this into patients to try to help whatever they're dealing with? Because as you mentioned, in this case, it was altruistic from that patient standpoint. So walk me through the timeline, what that looks like overall.
So a little bit later this year, we're going to come to the FDA with what's called an investigational device exemption application. And it's going to say, here is all the safety data, here is all the testing that we've done. We believe this device is ready for humans. They're going to review all of that data and make a determination. They may have some questions about the packet. And then the goal is that before the end of the year, we have approval to begin a first-in-human trial. Our first trial with this device will be giving it to people who have lost the ability to speak and have limited hand function, and allowing them to communicate through a computer. And so I'll say that that's really exciting, and it's actually already been done before in the lab using older research devices. In particular, there has been a clinical trial at Stanford and another clinical trial at UC Davis where people have received brain implants similar to ours who couldn't speak, and then use those brain implants to speak through a computer. And so we know that the science is there, and what the world has been waiting for now is a device that's not just a research device, something that doesn't have wires coming through the skin, something that will last for a long time, something that can go through the same kind of clinical trial, but then at the end of it become a product that can help people and people can receive as a therapy. And so that's what Paradromics is doing.
These initial use cases you mentioned, folks who have lost the ability to speak and hand function. Beyond that, what are some of the impairments and use cases that you see following after these initial ones that are their priorities for?
I'll tell you what I'm most excited about is that brain-computer interfaces can restore movement, they can restore sensation, but they can also read out other things like cognition and mood and pain. And so where I see the future of BCIs in like the bigger market sense is that there are millions of people in the US today with treatment-resistant mental illness where it's very hard to tell like whether a medication is going to work for them or when they're taking it, how much they should be taking, which medication is best. Is it objectively doing what it's supposed to do? Our only readout for mental illness, like their clinical readouts, you go to a doctor and they basically have a checklist. And, the kinds of things that we can prescribe people, we have powerful medications, we have implantable neurostimulators, but we don't have really good readout to know how those things are working. And a brain-computer interface, the same kinds of interfaces that can read out whether someone's trying to move, can also read out whether someone is depressed. And so I see the big picture applying these kinds of interfaces and generations that are even better to mental illness so that we can start to understand them objectively. And I think there's a really good example elsewhere that we can look at for how that might develop. Think about the treatment of diabetes. My grandfather had diabetes, and for him, it was a big deal when at-home finger prick glucose testing became available. When you could test in your own home, and that you start to get an ability to manage the condition when you can get data yourself. But still, that was cumbersome and you couldn't do it all the time. And then now we look recently with continuous glucose monitors. It's completely transformed the treatment of diabetes, even though it doesn't directly treat diabetes. Giving people the data in real time allows them to make lifestyle choices, to manage their metabolisms. And it turned out to be so useful that even people who don't have diabetes choose to get continuous glucose monitors just for wellness reasons. And so I think that, that's just a system as simple as measuring blood sugar. Now imagine a system as complicated as the brain. And you can imagine how getting better data on the brain would change brain therapies.
When you work on these mental illness use cases is super fascinating. Is it the same hardware? How much has to change to be able to tackle these use cases versus the initial ones we mentioned, like speech and movements?
One of the biggest things that has to happen is clinical science using the new hardware that's becoming available in the new generation technologies. So there are some amazing clinical researchers out there. I think of Mariam Shanecki at USC, Eddie Chang at UCSF, who are already doing experiments looking at the markers for mood and for things like pain, using the hardware that's available in the clinic, which is relatively crude. And so what I'm really excited about is to empower researchers of that caliber with devices that are 100 times higher data rate and have much higher resolution and can read so much more about the brain. Let them run some of the kinds of experiments they're already running and ask new questions that can't be asked with current hardware today, because I think that there's a discovery process that will unlock those new applications. Like, the hardware is available now, and I think it's a matter of going out and discovering the use cases.
On the business side of things, how does Paradromics plan to commercialize its products?
Well, almost in the way that I just described, our clinical plan, that also corresponds with our business plan, which is that we identified a first use case, restoring communication to people who can't communicate any longer. There are about 150,000 people in the US, we estimate, that meet the condition where they can no longer speak and they have limited hand function. That's a very severe condition, and it's one that we know BCIs in their current form would allow them to have better communicative lives. And so we've identified this unmet need, existing clinical proof points that suggest that we can build a product for them. And we anticipate for that indication, for that size population, for that degree of severity, we can get reasonably high reimbursement for devices, for that first application. And then what happens is that we're providing in parallel devices to lots of clinical research groups. We're putting them out there and showing that they can do different things. And then those things unlock the next applications. And some of those applications can be much larger. But the key for us was to start in a place where we knew there was very high demand for the product. We knew the clinical risk was low. And so we knew that we could land in that starting market and it would be relatively low risk. Got it.
Most people who track this space, if not all people who track this space, of course, think of Neuralink. That's a pretty mainstream name at this point. Do you view Neuralink as your biggest competitor? And what are some of the key differences between what you're trying to tackle and Neuralink is trying to tackle?
I think sometimes we compete for oxygen and maybe sometimes we compete for venture capital, but we're building for two very different reasons. I mean, Elon is on record saying he sees BCI as this existential hedge against AI. And in his world, he's completed his mission when everyone has a BCI and everyone has merged with AI. And so some of the design decisions that he built into this system reflect the idea that he wants a ubiquitous consumer level BCI. It's implanted by a robot rather than a neurosurgeon, so it can scale. The materials that they use can maybe be built at a low COGS, but also the devices aren't meant to last very many years. Because in kind of his world, you get a new phone every year and you're going to get a new BCI every year. We took a very different approach because we see our customer for the next 20 years being people who have unmet medical needs and want to get back to where they were before their injury or before their illness. And if you ask people who are getting a therapeutic device, what they will say is, I'm nervous about going into surgery. I don't want to get surgery, especially brain surgery. It's a serious thing. I will do it if it's going to help me and it's safe and if I won't have to do it again for a long time. And so as that is an input, we said, look, we want to build the highest data rate BCI we can to deliver the best outcomes to patients, but we also want to make a device that is going to last for a really long time. And so the biggest difference, I would say, between Paradromics and Neuralink are the two high data rate BCI companies in the world. We're the two companies that are building wireless platforms that can record from lots of neurons simultaneously. But we're very different in the sense that Neuralink is building a device that doesn't have a multi-year life expectancy. And Paradromics is building a device that our ideal is that could last for the lifetime of the patient. We've tested our devices now. We have some devices that have been recording these special signals called action potentials from individual neurons for more than 2.5 years, where we haven't seen any changes in those signals over time. We have a number of animals that have been implanted right now where we're characterizing both the biocompatibility of the device, but also how much data can we push across that interface. And I would say the last point that I would want to make is I think some people assume that if you're making a safer and more robust device, that you must be losing something somewhere, you must be sacrificing on the data rate. But we've benchmarked our systems at 130 bits per second, which is currently a world record for BCI information transfer rate. And no one else has even approached that number. Neuralink.
Can you just contextualize what that means?
Yeah. So just to give you a sense, like Neuralink's in their reports are saying that their device can transfer 10 bits per second of information, which is allowed for cursor control in like the best case scenarios. It's been 10 bits per second. And our system can deliver 13 times more data at a time. So it's a little bit like comparing, like dial-up modems and like DSL modems. And so like what will happen over time is that different platforms will advance to different extents. And so you'll have, just like you had in the internet, certain modems can allow you to stream real-time video, and certain modems can allow you to have like a text conversation. And the capabilities of the systems will ultimately determine what applications and how many applications and how well they can do. And so we're really happy because we took a while to design this device. I mean, it's been 10 years in the making since the company was started, but it's now a robust device that we have really high confidence in will last for a long time. And it's the highest data rate BCI on Earth.
On that note, I guess to just give us a sense, though, of given what you guys have accomplished in terms of data rates, et cetera, how difficult would it be for a competitor to catch up? There's other players in the space, so obviously, aside from Neuralink,
it would be very challenging.
Why is that? What have you guys done to get that?
Paradromics and Neuralink started around the same time. During that period of time, Neuralink spent 6 times more money than we did and was helmed by what I think we would agree is one of the best tech CEOs of our generation, Elon. But with 6 times more money and Elon, the only acceleration they bought was about a year going into their early feasibility trial. And the device they brought into that EFS isn't as good as the Paradromics device. So I would make the argument now with Paradromics and Neuralink multiple years out ahead of the rest of the pack, it would be extraordinarily challenging for someone to come and catch up just by having an awesome CEO or just by having a lot of money, because frankly, Neuralink had both and didn't make that much more progress.
What's your secret?
Yeah, so I'm super excited about where we are right now because we took a lot of time to design this device. We thought about what would make it last. How can we get the most data in and out? And it sounds like in some ways I've just been describing engineering terms, but like these engineering terms have real world human impact. So a device that only has 1 bit per second is a button that you can press. A device that has 10 bits per second is a cursor that you can control. Most scientists estimate that human speech can't be done realistically with less than 40 bits per second if you want to have a conversation like you and I are having right now. And so if you have less than 40 bits per second, you're making trade-offs. If you have more than 40 bits per second, you have enough headroom now in your device where you can do incredible things. And it'll keep going, like as we keep pushing the engineering, just like the internet changed as we got better modems, BCI and the world of applications will change, and what we can provide patients will change. And so, building the best device is a good thing.
All right, we will leave things there, Matt. This was fascinating. Thank you so much for your time. Matt Engel is
thank you for having me.
Of course. Thanks again.